webinar is focused on security for SAP S/4HANA projects. If you've not joined one of our webinars before, just a very quick intro into Turnkey. So we're a specialist consultancy focused on SAP GRC and SAP security. We operate across 4 continents, and we run a regular webinar series where we invite guest speakers to talk about issues relating to risk management, to cybersecurity, GRC, particularly where all of this relates to customers of SAP. We hear from 2 speakers today. First up, we have Stefan Marnoek from Turnkey. Stefan is a very experienced GRC consultant with extensive experience in implementing SAP's GRC suite and more recently with SAP S/4HANA projects. He has led many large-scale implementations of SAP GRC and regularly trains and mentors GRC consultants. Stefan, will be followed by Patrick Bock from Virtual Forge. Patrick has published numerous specialist articles and books on the subject of SAP security. His extensive knowledge and experience with regard to SAP security and particularly with HANA projects led Patrick to assume the role of product marketing at Virtual Forge. So without further ado, I'm now going to hand over to Stefan.
Thank you so much, Craig. So my approach for today is more from an authorization design perspective. I thought I'd let Virtual Forge cover all of the security, security layer, application layer security. Especially now coming off from a project as well where they are busy customizing and setting up the role design for an S/4HANA project. There's a lot of things that need to be considered. So I thought, let me just use my experience in that area and talk about some of the things that I think is quite important from an understanding in terms of the overall design going forward. So the 2 points on my agenda is just highlighting the gateway deployment. I just want to lightly touch on the subject since it does create more layers of complexity within the user and role administration and authorization design, which I just want to point out and make sure everyone has an understanding. The second topic on the agenda is the authorization design. For me, I've always thought it's very important ensuring the business and access restriction requirements are reflected within a clear and visible design. Giving the business the flexibility required to comply with SOX, of course, and audit requirements, as well as ensuring the business can engage with the design so that they can understand it and make it their own, is one of the big success stories in an authorization design. And authorizations have always been an afterthought to any project, and the design has always been the brainchild of a functional team that might not always consider that a role needs to give you more than just access. Firstly, there are 2 ways of deploying the SAP gateway. The first is the embedded deployment scenario. Without going into too much detail, the key considerations are that this solution is used best for connecting to only one backend system, for example. The structures and SAP content can be reused, which is what will become a little bit more clearer when we go over the layers of the authorization design. The second solution is called the central hub deployment. One of the main reasons for companies selecting this solution is that it provides an additional layer of security to stop external attacks. It also is recommended when a company has several backend systems, since you only need a single installation of the SAP gateway. So I just wanted to kind of share these 2 deployments does overcomplicate the authorization design and how you need to approach it. S/4HANA gives us a new presentation layer called SAP Fiori. Just the look and the feel of the SAP Fiori Launchpad, which obviously has its own complexities now because it adds additional authorization layers that needs to be considered in the overall design. This last slide just sort of covers all of the areas within the authorization design and why it needs to become very clear in terms of where the restrictions lie, how many layers of additional work there is to implement the SAP S/4HANA authorization design. So I thought of just breaking it up a little bit so that you can kind of understand where it comes from. The SAP Fiori look and feel is structured using Fiori groups, and then each of these groups represent a tab within the Launchpad, and then the Fiori tiles assigned to these groups. So, but having these groups also doesn't mean you have access to a tile. So, okay, so one of the key things is just to remember that the design needs to ensure visibility It needs to give you the flexibility and obviously comply with segregation, as well as keep track of all of the different layers that are now added to the front end and to the back end. Remember, we talked about two different SAP gateway deployments, which is your embedded and your central hub, and we'll highlight those as well now in this discussion. So at your top layer, you've got your Fiori groups. Each group basically represents a tab within your Fiori Launchpad. And then the tiles that are used for transacting or reporting within your Fiori design, for example, trial balance and journal entries, those are then allocated to the groups. These groups are then also assigned to the roles, but having access to a group does not necessarily mean that you can view the tiles. Layer is your Fiori catalogs. These have your KPI tiles, your app launcher tiles, and your target mappings. These all come together to form the restrictions. So if you don't have access to this Fiori catalog, then you won't be able to view any of the tiles that's assigned to you via the group. So that's why I've color coordinated them as well, just to kind of like point out at the end how your restriction would take place. So if you don't have the red catalog assigned to you, you will not be able to see the trial balance and journal entry analyzer. So yes, these tiles are then added into the different catalogs. The reason why we've segregated them as much will make a little bit more sense going forward. So the Fiori catalogs, then you have PFCG master roles that are created in the back end and front end. So with an embedded and SAP gateway deployment scenario, since everything is on one server, you only have to create PFCG roles once, only for the back end scenario. But with a central hub deployment of the gateway, you've got two areas that now is PFCG roles and users. So your data is copied over there. So your roles will have to be created on the back end as well as on the front end. So just imagine the complexity already of keeping all of these together and remembering which groups need to be assigned to which catalogs, which are assigned to which roles. So the Fiori groups, for example, can be assigned to a general role because, as I've mentioned, it's not necessarily that you'll have access to those tiles within the groups, but it is just a representation of the Launchpad and what it should look like if you have access to the actual catalogs. So then additionally, the catalogs are then also assigned to the master roles within your back end and front end PFCG master roles. We're just using a master role here as an example. And then on top of that, you'll have your derived roles where your organizational restrictions sit. So as you can see, we've already created 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 possible layers of maintenance. And also just to make sure that you are visibly making sure that the users have the right access by design and by names of the catalog and roles. You kind of need to make sure that you can see which roles are being maintained, and keeping them kind of aligned also will help to ensure that your understanding going forward of which catalogs are assigned to which roles need to be assigned to which users. That will then be a lot more clearer. So once all of these roles are created, then they are assigned to the users, and that's where your restriction comes from. So the thing about all of this as well, now you have to still apply your segregation of duties, your critical action risks. So having a tool like GRC or any risk tool that points out your risks that's associated with your users, you kind of still need to give them the flexibility to segregate the roles. You need to make sure that your roles and your catalogs and your groups and everything becomes visible, and that your design kind of runs through all of these layers to get to your user master data. So because of the front end and the back end, and then on top of that, your Fiori layer, you have a lot of maintenance that comes into play with your S services, also that's restricted in the back end. So I just wanted to highlight from an overall perspective in terms of your S/4HANA authorization design, how complex it can get. So getting your authorization design teams in place from the beginning already will definitely help to drive a consistent design that makes sure that it's visible. Assigning roles to users and making sure that they're restricted on organizational level is hard enough. Now you have to make sure that the right catalogs are assigned to the right roles, are assigned to the right users, adds an additional layer of complexity. So I just wanted to show you how complex it can get and how key and important it is to have your authorization design for your theory roles, catalogs, groups, and your front end, your back end. All of these parts are playing a big role in how you design your authorizations and assign those authorizations to the users. And then obviously your business also comes into play, and the business has to take ownership of these roles, especially for resolving risk and segregating before they apply mitigation controls. So I thought that would be just a good way of kind of like showing you the complexity, since I've just come off a project now, and there's a lot of things that you need to consider. And also hopefully make sure that your design is visible so that you don't get lost in all of the details. Some of the maintenance is also not as friendly as your backend, like your theory and your groups. There is a little bit of maintenance that goes into that and checking that, but that's another conversation altogether. So I just thought this would be a good way of just showing how complex the design can be, and this is the one security layer, and we'll give it over to Visual Forge now to continue with the presentation.
Thanks, Stefan.
Yeah, thanks, Stefan, first of all, for especially for going into the authorization part of the security layer. And yeah, I'm just quickly going to run through a couple of things that we see on that other security layers, which are important if you want to secure SAP HANA. And I'm just going to start with some general remarks. So first of all, why HANA is important for an attacker, actually. And there are two main reasons, which are, especially if you look at the considerations content-wise, are of course similar with HANA compared to other SAP or other ERP systems even. HANA contains the critical data. S/4HANA, especially as an ERP system for the HANA platform, there might not be all of the critical data in there, but for S/4HANA, definitely the business critical data is in there, and the business critical process is also in there. And that alone makes it interesting for an attacker to gain access to S/4HANA. There's another consideration for attackers, however, which we see, and that is mainly if you look at SAP technology as it was, the ABAP NetWeaver stack has been around for 25, 30 years by now. And it's been, you know, the SAP departments, they know their ABAP NetWeaver platform, but they don't know HANA just yet, or at least not as good as they know the ABAP world. And I think that's especially important because SAP departments might not have experience with some of the technologies used in HANA. However, most of the attackers, as HANA is for a good part relying on sort of standard technologies such as JavaScript, such as web technologies, they do have experience in finding vulnerabilities to that technology. Now, keeping that in mind, there are just 5 quick examples where we see risks for specifically SAP HANA. The first one is web applications. SAP HANA systems can easily be found on the internet, and in fact, they're default to displaying a web page. And if you just do a quick Google search, you're more likely to find you're most likely to find HANA systems on the internet where you can log on to. We've actually tried, and there's quite a few which would enable access if in the next step then you try to get some credentials to that. So unauthorized access is possible, and some of the services can obviously be misused. And again, HANA is vulnerable to typical web weaknesses, which the attacker most likely knows, such as cross-site scripting, SQL injection, or when we talk about S/4HANA, we're still talking about the ABAP world, and therefore that actually lays as another layer of complexity and security weaknesses. HANA is also vulnerable to ABAP weaknesses, as for HANA at least is. The second example I want to mention is something which is unique, not unique to HANA, but unique to in-memory technologies. And I must admit we haven't at least seen that sort of attack on a HANA system yet, but it's definitely possible. And that attack method is called RAM scraping. It has been around for quite a while, but it usually affects point-of-sale systems. So what happens is you swipe your card through the point-of-sale system, and for a very short period of time, your credit card data is in the memory of that POS. And for an attacker, it's possible to inject a malware into the memory, and that malware just is looking for credit card data and then sending them back to whatever server the attacker is using. The problem here is because the malware is loaded in memory, it's not easily detected, because the moment you restart the machine or you shut it down, the malware is gone as well. So it leaves almost no footprint. And since it's a attack method which directly targets in-memory databases or in memory in general, it's something which could potentially be used to target SAP HANA systems. And also data in SAP HANA, so in memory, is usually not encrypted. SAP has changed that in their latest release. I think they started at the end of last year, that they at least encrypt some of the data in memory, but encrypting data in memory is also putting a strain on performance, and therefore it's probably not feasible to encrypt all of the data. So there's a big likelihood that if that RAM scraping would take place, that actually data can be lost there. Basis security is another example. I think that's probably the most obvious one. Of course, you need to harden your systems, your HANA database in itself. For SAP customers, this at the end of the day means you need to, or you have another additional layer of complexity, because in reality, HANA systems and even S/4HANA systems are meant to replace other systems, but in reality they run parallel on top of the other things, on top of the other systems, which means more systems, more complexity, more system settings you need to take care of, and therefore more things you need to remember if you really want to secure your systems. Next up is also something which is unique to HANA in a way. There's a software out there called RServe, which is a software environment used for statistical data analysis. And HANA has a built-in connection to RServe. RServe, however, is a separate host, and by default, some privileged functions are activated, which include the possibility of executing operating system commands. And therefore, you have the possibility to access at least the operating system level of the HANA system when targeting RServe. I must admit it's a rather small attack vector as we see it, so it's probably it's highly unlikely that attackers will actually use that door to get access, but it's definitely a risk you need to mention. And when we're talking about SAP, we're also talking about custom development. That has not changed with HANA. In S/4HANA, you actually have the same development in terms of ABAP code or similar development as you have in older SAP systems. but even on other HANA platforms, S4 HANA Cloud or the HANA platform in general, you still have custom development. You will use different programming languages like JavaScript, like SQL script, like UI5, but nevertheless, custom development is still a big part of any SAP system, regardless of whether we're talking about HANA, S4HANA, or an older ABAP stack. So what can you then actually do, or what areas do you need to take into consideration when securing HANA? We have identified more or less 4 areas. I'm going to skip the roles and authorizations part because Stefan has, I think, made a good overview of what you need to consider and how roles and authorizations are built up in HANA. But I nevertheless would like to go into 3 other areas, which are configuration, coding, and transports. So authorizations we've covered. Configuration, just let me quickly step back 1 slide. This is actually taken from the SAP Help portal, and that picture alone shows that a HANA system is not something, well, let's say simple. It's a complicated array of different technologies, of different modules, and for each of these you have different security guidelines, security things, security settings you need to consider. And if you take a look at the HANA security guidelines, most of them actually deal with operating systems hardening. So this is definitely something which you need to consider. Stefan also mentioned the SAP Gateway, so therefore I'm not going into that as well. But nevertheless, there's a bunch of other components which you all need to secure. You need to, very importantly, especially if you consider going into the cloud as well, you need to secure the communication between the HANA system and all other systems which are connected to it, like RServe, like the front end, like the back end. So make sure all of your communication settings are secured there. I already mentioned the topic of data encryption, even though in memory, so the core of HANA, not all of the data is encrypted. There's other areas, data at rest on the hard disk, of course, where data encryption is possible and where you should use it in any case. I'm explicitly mention it because some of this is not activated by default in HANA. Logging is an important feature. If you do have an attack, logging enables you to actually find out where the attack was coming from, and therefore it will help you in the forensic research, if something happens. Secure development, mentioned custom development is still a big part of SAP HANA in general, of S4 HANA. So if you develop in HANA, do it securely. And from our point of view, actually HANA is a good sort of starting point where you can actually start with security by design. So the moment you develop, start doing it securely. Establish a secure software development cycle. Establish secure programming guidelines. Validate the security of your in-house developments using code scanners and segregation of duties or a workflow, approval workflow for all of your programs. And then also analyzing the source code and look at who has access to that source code. Also very important thing to do when, especially when you business authorizations, but also look at the technical authorizations when you do HANA. Transports is in general a topic which is often overlooked. in SAP security, but transport is actually a good way to sort of sneak security vulnerabilities into the production system. We've actually just discovered a vulnerability in the SAP transport management system, which enables potential attackers to sneak any object, any table into the productive system without anyone noticing it. And we've even, using that technology or using that method, we were even able to simply delete an entire SAP system with just one transport object. So transport is something you definitely should consider in your security considerations overall. That is maybe or also important for third-party software, even though third-party software might not willing or knowingly introduce security weaknesses, but there still can be some things which can be misused by potential hackers. And usually, if you have third-party software, you will not be able to look at it before you import it. So make sure you have your transports considered as well. And looking at the time, I will not go into some of the details of the solutions which we as Virtual Forge offer. But what I can say is that we cover all of these three areas, coding, configuration, and transports when it comes to security. And then with the help of Turnkey, we will also be able to secure the authorization and roles in SAP HANA. So that gives you a really comprehensive security or comprehensive security measures for your S4 HANA and HANA projects. And that's it from my side. So I'll hand back to Craig for
Thank you, Patrick.
Q&A sessions.
Yeah, well, as we're very close to time and we don't actually have any questions from the audience, I think we'll look to wrap up the session so we can keep to the half hour. Just before I do, just some more useful information for you. So Virtual Forge are running a roadshow called C-Forge, which is being run across the globe, including London, Frankfurt, Sydney, the US and Singapore. The event focuses on application security for SAP and will explore issues relating to GDPR, to cybersecurity. There'll be, I believe, some live hacking taking place during the events, and also we'll be touching on some of the topics that have been discussed today. So Turnkey will be partnering with Virtual Forge at the London event, which takes place on June the 12th, and you can register for any of the events at the Virtual Forge website. As always, we provide regular resources which can be found on our website. So we recently published a couple of guides on SAP Identity Management and also upgrading to SAP GRC 12.0. In terms of this webinar, we have recorded it, and we will send you a link very shortly. It will also be made available on our website, so you can watch it again or share it with your colleagues. But that concludes today. Stefan and Patrick, thank you so much again for taking the time to talk to us. Thanks to you for listening, and we hope to see you again soon.